Hi.
I'm Faye. This is Larry. And
Hello.
Larry agreed very generously to an interview today about the death of his wife, Carol, which was recent. And one of the reasons to show the information, is that most people don't know what their alternatives are at the end of life, and particularly the one that Carol took, and how it goes, and why one would choose that, and uh, why it differs from suicide, say, and under what circumstances people do decide to end their own suffering. So, Larry, could you tell us a little bit about Carol? She was a remarkable woman.
She was absolutely remarkable. She started her career working for the U.S. mission to the United Nations, and the ambassador then was George Bush, who later became president. She started by practically washing windows, but every time that they had her take papers over to the UN delegation, she would just sort of sit and stay, and finally became a political officer. And actually, because she was very beautiful and very smart, became a informer for the CIA on what other countries were doing. And again, because she was so popular and kind and smart, she would be sent in to talk to the delegations where the United States never even had a political connection, because she could get these ambassadors to chat with her, and she'd go back and let the U.S. government know what it was that these other governments were thinking. She went from there to Union Carbide, where she wrote a code of conduct, which unfortunately was not very well followed. Bhopal was a disaster for that company. And when they moved from New York to Danbury as a single woman, she thought staying in New York was a better idea. After 22 odd interviews, she landed a job at Goldman Sachs in the credit department, where she developed a new business, which was learning how to teach countries how to get better credit ratings from Moody's and Standard & Poor. And so she then acted as an advisor to the governments of China, India, Chile, and a number of other countries, which was a very high power, exciting kind of work to do. She and I retired here 30 years ago.
How did you meet?
Traveling. Well, we met at a variety of institutions where we were both members. And in fact, we had two mutual friends who had not introduced us. They were saving Carol in case their own marriages didn't work out well. But we met, and I'm a calm guy now, but I must have been full of it when I was young, because within 3 weeks I had her convinced to move in with me, and 2 weeks later we were engaged. So we were married for 41 wonderful years and had overlapping responsibilities. She was busy with the petrodollar system, trying to get money into countries. I was in the investing business, trying to get money out of countries. So we had our own home petrodollar refinancing industry.
And India was something in common between the two of you.
Well, I lived in India for 4 years. I was the U.S. Treasury attaché, and that was probably the best job I ever had in my career, because I was 10,000 miles away from my boss, and there were some real issues that had to be dealt with in India. So an economist in India was in a good place to be. Carol then later became an advisor to the Indian government on their credit rating, and it was very interesting. Some of my old contacts would come up to her and say, Mrs. Veet? And she said, yes, I'm the second Mrs. Veet. They couldn't recognize her because I had remarried, and they had forgotten the first Mrs. Veet.
So, when we knew you both where we live now, a retirement community, Carol was disabled in that she was usually seen in a wheelchair, pushed by you. When did that start with her?
That started 35 odd years ago when she slipped on the ice in New
Oh
York.
my gosh.
And she had a spinal problem which required multiple surgeries. And in fact, when we first moved 4 years ago, she was able to walk, but her walking abilities were deteriorating and had been for 10 years already. And nobody ever was able to diagnose what the problem was, and therefore they never were able to fix it. So she was disabled when she lived here the whole time, but it was not just that disabled her. She also was bipolar. We found a wonderful psychiatrist here who was able to get her stable mentally, but she had a neuralgia of the trigeminal nerve, for which she required Botox shots every 3 months. She had a knee problem which required a knee replacement 2 years ago. There were just so many things that she had that were wrong, and the coup de grace came in the past year when her glaucoma finally led her to the point where she was having trouble seeing.
I remember also that she was always in pain, that we couldn't have dinner for a long time before her pain was too great and she had to leave. Can you say something about her pain?
The pain could be anywhere from modest to excruciating. It would come in phases.
What did she do for her pain?
She iced a lot of the time. She spent a great deal of her time lying on her bed watching a television set on the wall, and she was a lover of old movies, so with the problems that she had with her brain, she was able to watch the same movie 10 times, and it was new to her every time. So if it was Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca, that was great.
How did all that affect you? It's really tough on the caregiver or the spouse.
I was totally devoted to Carol and in love with her. And every hurt that she felt, I felt as well. I felt a terrible responsibility in trying to help her, and a sense of failure in that I wasn't able to really sort things out the way most things in life I'm able to sort out, but not this one. And the past year or so, it became so affected by the diseases and problems. I was having to help her put on her pants. She couldn't lean over to do that herself anymore. And her daily life almost was masochistic in that she was forcing herself into a situation where she really wanted to be out of it. She was not comfortable being alive anymore.
When did you first start talking with her about ending her life?
Well, I didn't start talking. It was for her to start talking. And she started, I guess, about 1.5 years ago. Not with the sense that I'm going to do it and do it right now, but the sense that if I get another bout of spasms in my back, how am I going to deal with it?
Were you able to talk to doctors about this?
We talked to one doctor who was totally unsympathetic and caused trouble in at least temporarily stopping some of the pain medications that she was getting. Through the help of her psychiatrist, we found another internist who was able to accept the problems such as they were and try to be helpful in prescribing medications. And then when she said to him, at some point I may want to end my life, the internist was able to say, well, I think you should talk to this doctor. I don't know if I should mention his name or not.
Sure.
A lovely man named Bob Uslander, who specializes in the care of people who are near the ends of their lives and who specializes in a very humane way in trying to make the process of dying more comfortable and easier for them.
Most people don't even know that we've had a law in California and now 11 other states, permitting doctors to help certain people end their lives. Those certain people are people with a terminal illness, which 2 doctors have to agree they only have 6 months or less to live. I assume Carol didn't meet those criteria.
She did not, but she did meet the criteria of being able to stop eating and drinking. And that process, if it was done properly, which meant moving out of the residential community where we were, because later we would need nurses and doctors coming and prescribing and administering medications that the facility might or might not agree with. And we wanted to be totally in charge of the process. We needed to know that Carol would be as comfortable as possible going through the process, and we knew that the process would have the intended ending.
Did Dr. Uslander suggest what we call VSED, voluntarily stopping eating and drinking? Did he suggest VSED as a possible alternative for her?
I'm not sure whether he suggested it or we suggested it, because we'd done some research on the subject, but it was clearly something that when we met Dr. Uslander, he spent an hour here interviewing us. He spent several hours on the telephone afterward talking to Carol's psychiatrist, talking to her internist, to make sure that she qualified for being mentally sound and able to make decisions, and therefore for having the right to control her life, or lack of life as the end might be.
It's very interesting that you say that, because most authorities who write about VSED, here's one scholarly book on it written by 4 very good scholars on the subject, point out that there's no law governing VSED, that you don't really have to prove anything, you just, not simple, but you just stop eating and drinking. Of course you need help with that, but you don't have to demonstrate that you're mentally competent. You don't have to have any doctors agreeing with this. This is a non-medical procedure. Very interesting that you got all these doctors to sort of certify her eligibility for a process that you don't need to be eligible for.
I think that the question of the doctor's participation and termination dates is a gray area where a responsible, respectable doctor who wants to be helpful has to be very careful not to lose his license or even go to jail. So they want to pre-qualify people before they help them, so they know that their own futures are going to be whole.
That's very interesting. A lot of people think that stopping eating and drinking, which is not an unpopular way to die, and much better than shooting yourself or jumping in front of trains, is fairly peaceful. Did you find it to be a fairly peaceful process?
It was,
after all the certifications and everything?
It was totally peaceful. A day after she stopped eating and drinking, we went to a bed and breakfast, which we had rented at their suggestion. And then we didn't have anybody intervening in the process other than the doctors and the nurses who we had hired.
You had a room at this place or an apartment?
We had a small house.
I see. Okay.
In La Jolla. Very nice little place. But we went there, and after a couple of days, the discomfort of not eating and drinking is such that it needed some amelioration. And so she was given 2 drugs, Ativan and morphine. And she was in a sleep much of the time. It was extremely peaceful. The night before she died, I went and told her how much I loved her, told her how much I would miss her, told her she had permission to go. And that very same night she went.
When you were telling her this, she was in a sort of coma.
She was definitely out.
Yeah.
She was out.
But she heard it.
You hear.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that was after how many days it took her to die?
It took her only 5 days. Everybody was surprised how quickly it went, but I take that as a sign of how ready she was to go and how willing she was to go under the circumstances.
generally the time limit we get is 9 to 14 days, so 5 days is quite, and it depends a lot on the person's frailty and their lack of appetite and other things that are going on with them.
We did cut back on how much food she was taking a couple of days before she stopped eating altogether. That may have helped a little bit, but...
And you know, those of us who love to eat think this way of dying, which is pretty popular since the restrictions on legal aid in dying are so narrow, is not a good way to die. But you're saying for her it was good, and these authors agree, and this little handbook also agrees that VSED can be a peaceful way to go. And I'd like some reassurance as a person who loves to eat that is not bad.
She really didn't cry out for food or drink. We put some glycerin on her lips to keep them a little moist. The other piece of this activity that I hadn't yet mentioned is after a day she was admitted to hospice, and the hospice doctor was extremely kind, helpful. He was available 24/7, and on one occasion he just sat with Carol for an hour and 15 minutes, chatting with her and checking to make sure the medications were working in the right way.
That's very important. That, may I say, was top care?
It was top care, and
Yeah.
the chief medical officer was a man named Dr. Brian Graham.
Yeah. It's wonderful to know that there are humane, kind people who are not deterred by hastening death, because some people are.
These people were absolutely wonderful in terms of their dedication to not just the final result, but the process of making it as comfortable for Carol and for me and our son, who was there 24/7.
How was he?
Yeah. They just made it easier. It was expensive because we needed professional, high-quality nurses 24/7, but maybe it could be done for less money if somebody else needed to really save on money. For us, we just wanted to do it as well as we possibly could. This is the way it was suggested. The importance of the hospice is that if a person dies in hospice, a coroner is not required, so that the death certificate is signed by the hospice doctor.
What does it say?
It says geriatric aging and cardiopulmonary failure.
Cardiac arrest.
Yeah, cardiac arrest. Yeah, she died because her heart stopped beating, and they have their medical terms for it, but
Right. It is why most people are classified as dying of heart disease, because that's what people put on the death certificate, cardiac arrest, which has nothing to do with heart disease.
yeah.
No. Would you use that process if you had thoughts of hastening your death?
Absolutely. I think of myself as a speck in the spectrum of the universe. I'm not a very important thing. My children will remember me. Maybe my grandchildren will remember me. But after that, nobody's going to remember me, no matter what I do, living or dying. The comfort of my family is important, and the comfort that I feel is important.
Yes.
And these are controlled decisions that need to be made intelligently, not emotionally.
One thing we do in the Hemlock Society, which we've been doing for almost 40 years, is letting people know what their alternatives are at the end of life. One is the law that we didn't talk about very much here, but Carol would not have qualified because she would not have been considered to have 6 months or less to live. She was mentally competent, she was a citizen of California and all that,
Yes.
but not eligible for the law. And if she had been eligible for the law, then Bob Uslander, whom you mentioned before, who is with Empowered Endings, is his organization, would have been able to help. But as it was, he was able to help with the VSED process.
Yes. I gather somebody who qualifies under the 6-month rule and has at least two doctors, usually and a psychiatrist, sign off on it. You just have a medication that you can get from your pharmacy, and the person takes that medication, and within 10 minutes they're gone. That would be the easy way to go, but that was not available to my Carol.
No, nor is it available to many people who don't follow those guidelines, and that's really a shame. And we're trying to expand the law to include a lot more people who often resort to violent ways of killing themselves to end their suffering, which is really horrible. So I'm glad you and your doctors got together and found a better way.
After it was all done, I learned that the doctors had protracted conversations with each other. One talked to the psychiatrist for an hour and a half, just to make sure that they knew what they were doing and they were comfortable with what they were doing, and that the person themselves was committed to what she was going to do. It was all done well.
Can you estimate the cost? You said it was an expensive process.
It may have been $25,000.
Oh my gosh.
And if we'd had more days with more fancy nursing, it would have been a lot more.
Well, do you remember what Dr. Uslander charged?
Yes, I think his fee was either $600 or $700. No, $600 or $700 for the first interview, and then $6,000 to make all the arrangements and involve all the other people.
Yeah, I think people need to know about that. The dying that way is not cheap.
No, it's not cheap.
Even though it's just stopping eating and drinking, which sounds simple, it isn't.
Well, it's the feeling no pain as a result of stopping eating and drinking. It's the gentleness and calmness and ease with which the process happens.
And that happens too with the legal way of doing it. The End of Life Option Act can be very gentle, very kind, if it's done right.
Yes.
And not necessarily expensive, but because that's something you can do here at a retirement community like we have here.
And it has been done here.
Yes, has been done many times. Yes. What did your son think about the whole thing?
He was happy for Carol. He was happy for me. He was happy for himself and his sister. Carol's life had become very, very tortuous and unpleasant, and she never wanted to leave us, but at the same time, she couldn't be with us, and she couldn't live with us and enjoy us. So the time had come. She was 82 years old. She had had many, many wonderful years. We traveled internationally a lot. She had this wonderful job. According to her, she had a wonderful husband. We didn't want to ever leave, but then we all do leave eventually.
You know, the motto of the Hemlock Society is good life, good death. And it sounds like Carol fulfilled those two criteria.
She sure did.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, other alternatives, I don't know whether she considered what Final Exit Network does, which is the recommending the inhalation of an inert gas. Nitrogen is the preferred gas now. Did you or she consider that as an option?
I think I considered it more than she, because I would be the one who had to be on the front line actually doing the activity. I didn't feel all that comfortable with it, and I know someone couldn't do it for me. It just didn't feel right. Although for some people it's absolutely the best and least expensive and easiest way to go.
And then there's a Swiss option. Some of our members go to one of two organizations in Switzerland. That would have probably been out of the question for Carol.
We might have bundled onto a plane, but it wouldn't have been an easy thing to do. And the Swiss option requires a lot of preconditions getting approved, and it's sort of a long, torturous process in a sense. it was easier to do it here.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that many people in our audience would concern themselves with people who have dementia and early dementia. And VSED, stopping eating and drinking, is a good solution to people who want to end their lives before dementia sets in,
right,
and they lose competence. Although we know that people with dementia often have authorize their families to not feed them and hydrate them if they are in advanced stage of
right,
dementia.
right. One thing I was thinking of that just fell out of my mind all of a sudden.
I know that happens a lot. The retirement community that you're living in now knows, or do they know? I don't know how
Yes,
Carol died.
Sure, of course I told them.
Mm-hmm. Did they have any problems with your moving her out of here?
Oh, that's the other thing that I wanted to mention. Carol, being the generous person that she was, had signed the papers donating her body to UCSD for medical research. And so that was a good thing to have done too.
Yeah, a lot of us have done that. It certainly saves the trouble of finding a place to bury your body and the pollution of cremation and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how now that you're no longer a caregiver, how is life for you, and are you able to grieve? And you must be missing her, but at the same time must be a relief.
Oh, I miss her terribly. I walk around the apartment and I see her here, there, everywhere. But I have a lot of very kind and good friends. I don't know of anybody who disapproved of what she decided to do. Everybody has been supportive and lovely and caring. My dance card for dinner is full up for the next few weeks. I'm starting to try and see if I'm interested in Tai Chi or yoga, things that, fill a life and make it useful. Participating with other people in various activities. So long as my health is good, which I think it is, I have 2 wonderful children, 2 wonderful grandchildren, and a lot of good friends. So this is what makes life important to me.
What would you say was the hardest part of what went on with you and Carol?
It was the being on duty 24/7. I never knew when she would get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom whether she might fall and trip, and I'd have to. So I didn't sleep well for a few years.
Were you her only caregiver?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We didn't like strangers running around the apartment, working 5 minutes out of every hour, and.
Oh. Wow, that's a burden.
Well, it was, but it was a blessing because I was doing for my loved one, and she deserved it. She would have done it for me.
What was the best part of the way Carol died?
Closure, in the sense that we moved on from a very difficult period of 7 years. 7 years ago, she had a sepsis that almost killed her. To a period in which she's no longer struggling every day, and I'm no longer harassed every day and feeling burned out.
So, when you hear the word suicide, what do you think about, and how does that apply to your situation?
I think of it as a different category of death than the one that Carol took. Suicide to me sounds more violent, more thought about in the short term rather than considered over a long period of time. Suicide sounds almost as though it's more selfish than the kind of process that Carol went through, where she had the opportunity to say goodbye. Her daughter flew in from New York for 24 hours to see her. Suicide just doesn't feel that way.
No, we've never really come across a good word to describe aid in dying sounds like somebody else is helping. Medical aid in dying sounds medicalized.
Yeah.
Derek Humphrey coined the word self-deliverance, which I think is a better word.
Yes.
As a clinical psychologist myself, to me, suicide means impulsive, sometimes.
Yeah.
Tortured, because it's all inside your head. How are you going to do this? Often violent. I had two friends, one jumped off the bridge and one shot himself.
Yeah.
And lonely. You can't do this with people around you.
Yeah.
So it seems very different to me. We do need a better word.
Well, that'll be our next job then, Faye. We'll
Okay.
get a better word.
Thanks, Larry, for being so candid about this. I'm hoping that what you say today helps a lot of people out there who really don't understand what happens when people are suffering very much. Not necessarily at the end of their lives, because Carol could have lived another, who knows, few years the way she was living, but suffering. And some people just decide enough is enough, and they want to end their life that way. So it's very helpful for people to know what their choices are. The Hemlock website will have all those choices listed. And there may be more as we learn more things about how people can end their lives or self-deliver, as it were.
Well, I know, Faye, that you have helped a great many people. And if this interview helps even one person, it'll have been well worthwhile.
Well, that's how I feel too, but I think it'll help more than one person. I really hope that the audience understands what ending life this way or self-deliverance is about, what the choices are, why even this difficult choice of voluntary stopping eating and drinking can be made much better, and what it takes to prepare for a choice like that, or any choice at the end of life. Preparing for end of life is a process. There's documents that need to be fixed. There's doctors that need to be contacted.
And the ambiguity of it all, if you use the word brave, is it more brave to live with constant severe pain, or is it more brave to just say enough is enough and to leave?
Good point. And that's for Carol. And then you are also brave. But again, what's the alternative? To see your wife suffer.
Well, it was very important that I not raise the subject, that she was the one who raised the subject, and then I could respond to her. But it had to come from her initially.
That's a dilemma for doctors who often treat people at the end of life who may even know what the end of life options are, but don't want to bring it up. I remember when my doctor, a long time ago, even me, said, "Do you have a living will?" And I thought, oh my God, am I dying? So, yes. Well, anyway, thank you very much, Larry, for doing this. And we all wish you luck in getting over your wonderful love for Carol and the grief that you must be feeling.
Thank you, Faye. You are among my good friends.
I'm privileged. Here's the VSED Handbook, very helpful. Thank you. Thanks, John.